This, Jim, and then if you could help me with these. The first page is the an update on the minimum wage law. You all know this. It hasn't changed since it was passed. You need more? Okay. Couple of opportunities if you choose to. A lot depends on the labor market where you are. You might not be able to use the youth wage or the training wage, but this will tell you what the rules are. If any of you have less than $500,000 in annual revenue, not including sales tax, you qualify as a small employer. Now, that doesn't mean the labor market in your area is workable to that, but that's what the law is. There is also a new summer work travel visa wage that applies to students who come here from other countries on J visas. Now, again, there's a labor market issue, and at least one of the international contracts has a provision saying that you agree to pay your international workers at least the same rate you pay non-international workers. So if you pay $9 an hour to non-students, you'd have to, under that contract, have to pay $9 to your J student visas. If you provide either lodging or a meal plan, you can pay international students. It was $750 this year and $775 next year. You have to watch your labor market, but that's what's allowed under the law. And Jim, how are you paying your international students? Do you mind if I ask?
The JD.
$775?
$750 right now and $775 next August.
Yeah, and you provide lodging.
And room and board. Yeah.
And do you charge them something for lodging? All right. If you charge them something for lodging, then there is some question as to whether you're eligible for this, because it says if you provide lodging, and the law isn't clear as to whether you can charge for it. But most of you charge well under the market, so I think you're probably okay. We have an increasing number of members using J visas. Now, it only applies to lodging properties. Pure restaurants aren't in this. It was crafted by Representative Tom Bach, representing Iron Range, or I'm sorry, North Shore and Gunflint Trail properties. It says hotels, resorts, other lodging properties. I'm not aware of any campgrounds that are using it, but a campground would fit under the definition of a lodging property. All right. The next page is a summary of the child labor laws. I had a dozen calls this year about various details of employing workers. I'll tell you what the law is, and you'll tell me that in your market that may not be what's happening. But under the law, you cannot employ people to pay them until they're 14. They're 12 and 13-year-olds can be newspaper carriers, they can detassel corn, they can babysit, but you lawfully can't employ them in the resort, even if they're your own kids. Now, the difference between working on the resort and doing their chores is a gray area, and use good judgment, but that's what the law says. There are fairly clear rules as to the hours that 14 and 15-year-olds can work and 16 and 17-year-olds can work. Isn't often a big problem in resorts because it's later during the summer vacation school year issue. The biggest cause we had for violations, and we have one resort that's fighting a whole raft of violations. If they collect all the fines that they could charge him with, it's a upper 5-figure fine for child labor violations. He was having 14 and 15-year-olds operating power lawnmowers and riding lawnmowers. You can't do that. The next pages in here are the detailed rules of what you can have 14 and 15-year-olds and 16 and 17-year-olds do. There's some clear provisions about things like meat saws and walk-in coolers, but on the 14 and 15-year-olds, there's a provision that says power equipment including snow blowers, doesn't mention lawnmowers. Department of Labor interprets that as including either push behind or riding lawnmowers. So practically, you shouldn't have people running lawnmowers that aren't 16. Golf carts is a gray area. It doesn't mention them. Many of my members do have 14 and 15-year-olds on housekeeping or running towels or doing things like that, driving golf carts. It's a gray area. 16-year-olds can. There's some exceptions for driving motor vehicles when they're 16 and 17. The details are here. Also worry about your insurance. Your insurance for driving your vehicles may have some provisions about how old the students have to be. There is a provision for 14 and 15-year-olds about, quote, dangerous chemicals. I don't think it's reasonable to call Tide or Pledge or Windex a dangerous chemical. Pure bleach, probably. Pure ammonia, probably. So for housekeeping, put them on a team with an older person. The citation we're working with in Stearns County, it does involve some housekeeping violations. I think the resort owner will win those. He's not going to win on some hours of work issues and on power equipment issues. As I explained to him, resorts and campgrounds aren't the target for these child labor laws. It's manufacturers and greenhouses and kind of sweatshops that we get swept up in the enforcement laws intended for truly bad actors. But the fines can run up to $10,000. No, that's not right. Now up to $5,000 per violation. But if you have 3 16-year-olds or 15-year-olds running lawnmowers, that could be 3 violations. And it could be 3 violations every day they caught you having kids riding lawnmowers. So it's potentially really expensive. They're not too bad about putting these things in the paper, which is good, so we haven't had bad publicity yet. If it ends up going to court, there'll be some bad publicity, which I hope we don't have to contend with, but it's a problem. That's the, any questions on child labor stuff? Have any of you had visits from Department of Labor inspectors or county inspectors about child labor issues?
If they were 16, they can mow grass?
At 16, they can mow grass. 14 and 15-year-olds. Now, if you had a hand mower with no motor on it, which I'm not sure they even make them anymore, because it says motorized equipment. Now, be careful, make sure that they've had some training, that they're not mowing steep side hills and things. But the provision appears that nowhere does it say 16-year-olds can mow. What it says is 14 and 15-year-olds can't, and so we're not aware of any citations for 16-year-olds to mow. Now, there are some provisions about moving vehicles for 14 and 15-year-olds. If you use them on the dock, probably a risk that if they're running big outboards, that could be called power equipment, but you'll have to be the judge of that. It's probably better if your older employees move boats, at least if they can't lead them around on a road. Any other on child labor? Unfortunately, there's big money here. And the money goes to the Department of Labor's miscellaneous income account that they love, sort of I'm guilty of having called it a slush fund, which their commissioner was unhappy with, but it's true, it's what it is. All right, the next page in the handout, I think, is the Resort Preservation Act. Carolyn, this is the item that you and I talked about yesterday. In 2007, we got a bill passed. It should be the last page in your handout. And it has increasingly been an issue this year because of windstorm damage. But essentially it allows resorts, and it does not include campgrounds, although you don't have as many buildings that I worry about, to rebuild a building that has burned or been destroyed by, quote, natural disaster, which we interpret as being windstorm, tornado, snow load, flood, that you can replace it on the same setback. And there's, you can't get bigger, you can't get closer to the water, but it has helped several of our members rebuild. I guess it's been in the paper. Madden's, for example, on Gull Lake was greatly aided by this. City of East Gull Lake was very helpful. We've had it happen with fires a couple times since I've been at the association. It is not at all unusual for grandfathered resort buildings to be closer to the water and grandfathered than they could be rebuilt at absent this law. And feel free to give this to county zoning administrators or building inspectors. They don't like it, but they have to follow it. It is the law. Have any of you had issues with having to rebuild stuff? All right, it's, and we hope nobody has fires or natural disasters. You can't plan things like July 12th. It was And Baden's had two older buildings badly damaged, one of them totally damaged, and they were only 30 feet from the water. The new standard is 50 or 75 feet in that zoning district. It would have made a huge difference to their business. So that's what's in the handout.